So you're looking like a movie star.
Yeah, does it work? Should have been wearing sunglasses forever.
Yeah, I think so. So how have you been? I haven't seen you for a couple of weeks.
Good. Yeah, it's been a
You've
while.
been
Oh,
minding the
good.
store.
Yep. No, it's been good. Been really good. So just busy being busy.
Yep.
So here in our area, we're kind of in the thick of some campaigning stuff. My sister is running for state senate, so
Oh, is that right? Oh, wow. Good for her.
yep. For the district, I don't live in her district, but it's the district that surrounds my district. So I can't vote for her, but I can help her out. So
So state senator, that's different, obviously, from a federal senator, right?
right, yep. Or the capital for South Dakota is Pierre, so that's where she goes. She will be
Okay.
going.
Oh, that's
So
exciting. So is this something new for her, or is this something she's been doing for a while?
this is the second time around for her. She was elected 2 years ago to the House of Representatives, State House of Representatives, and this year she's going for this term. She's going for Senate. So hopefully she gets it.
Yeah, good for
So,
her. Yeah,
so
good luck.
thanks.
Good luck for her.
She has thanks. She has on her T-shirt. She on the back it says a woman's place is in the House and the Senate. So, Greg,
Yeah,
just to
that's
catch you up, my sister's running for the state senate here, and that's kind of what I've been consumed with recently. Because Anthony asked, "What have you been doing?"
Right. Wow,
So,
that's quite an event. Wish her luck. That'll be kind of neat.
thanks.
Um, you'll be able to get
yeah,
things done in town or in the
Yeah,
state.
yeah, that's fantastic.
That's good.
so
I'm sure she's a great lady.
I have to take a call. I just someone called and they never usually call, so I'm going to log off
Maybe
and
it's the
log right
president.
back in.
Okay, to make
No,
sure
it
it's
won't
okay.
be.
I'll just be a second
Okay.
too.
Uh,
Have you watched the last couple of videos from last week? I think I put them on fairly early in the week.
You know, I watched a couple. I'm trying to think what they were. I think there might have been some in between. If you refresh my memory, I'll be able to. I don't think they were real long, right? There wasn't.
Well, I divided it into three because we sort of covered three different things, right? Even though they're related. So each one is about 20 minutes, 25, maybe 30 minutes long.
Yeah, there's a couple in here I need to watch. I was kind of working my way upwards through it. I didn't see this one. It looks like Using Your Mind as a Time Machine and How to Super Age with Elise Mayer Collins. I didn't see that.
Oh, yeah, that's the podcast I was on last week.
But so I was kind of working my way up and saw a few of them, and I think I saw the one that you had the guy that was doing kind of quick. I think it was probably Robert. That was pretty deep. It was pretty long, but I had already watched it. I think because I don't know if it was on a feed from you from elsewhere, but
Right.
yeah. I mean, I'm kind of in the. I don't know what your agenda is here. I'm kind of in the practical stages of using, the workbook and kind of focusing on that as I get into some of the goals. There's sub goals and things that you have to do to get things to work. And so,
Right.
kind of figuring out which, from the practical strategies part of achieving the goal, I guess that, starts getting to time management and, what do you think is most, you got to kind of prioritize and see what's most critical to achieve, moving towards goals and things like that. So I'm kind of into the fray of it a little bit.
Well, that's good. Yeah,
Good.
to me, there's sort of two parts to this process. The first part is to figure out what you want. And of course, that can be a long study or it can be short. If
Right.
if your goal is to become an accountant, a CPA, then you can say, well, I need to go to university, which means I got to finish high school, get good marks, go to university, study for a few years, pass all my courses, fairly clear path, right?
Right.
So each one of those can be like, you can have that as a goal. And same thing if you want to be a doctor, anything like that. So in that sense, if you have that idea, you have that goal in mind, then your path can be fairly straightforward, right?
Right.
And of course, all the other things about motivation and attitude and persistence and clarifying your vision and all that stuff, they all come into play no matter what you're doing, right? So
Right.
a large part of that workbook is about sorting out all your what I call dreams. Well, a dream is a thought, basically, right?
Right.
So a large part of the workbook comes down to figuring out what your goals are. And ideally, to have a sort of a vision of your whole life, like in those 6 areas, that everything kind of fits together, right?
Right.
That's the ideal thing. So that's the first part of the system, is to figure out what you want, right? Well, if you know what you want right away, then you can, more or less, you don't have to worry about all those worksheets and things so much. They're for people that don't know what they want, right? But of course, the trick is that when you do have a goal, like I was talking about my trip to England, when I first started, it was go to England. Just a phrase, and then when I got the idea about doing a talk there, then it was like, oh, how do I do that? So that was something a little different, because that was something that I didn't know how to do. I'd never done it before. Like, I'd never sort of figured out, found a sponsor in a sense, right? To invite me to give a talk there. So that involved the other part of the process, which is tapping into your inner self, And so I call that then, contacting your future self, right? Now, this was one of the very first insights that I had way back in the early 80s. When I first got this idea that thinking is a connection, or at least first thing was memory is a connection, right? Because my question that I was trying to answer was, how is it possible for a 10-year-old kid to have an image of himself at 32 and then have that happen? Because it happened by a fluke in some ways, right?
Right.
I considered it impossible. It was good. It was completely outside my awareness. I never knew anybody who wrote books and started a business and traveled teaching people. So to me, it was outside my entire experience. And I was still doing the meditation, because that was an essential part of it, doing the meditation, visualization exercises. And during one of those exercises, I remembered having that dream. And I went, wow, that's amazing. I remember having that dream, because I'd sort of forgotten about the dream, right? And so when I remembered the dream, then I realized, well, hey, if memory is not a recording, but it's a connection, then that would explain how it's possible for the 32-year-old and the 10-year-old to be connected, and for the 10-year-old to get information from the 32-year-old. Because from the 32-year-old's perspective, I'm just remembering something that happened in the past. That's memory. But from the 10-year-old, I didn't have any way to explain how it's possible to know what I was going to be doing at 32 in advance and have it more or less unfold similar to Michael Caine's story, kind of by a fluke,
Mm-hmm.
It was like, oh, I see, I did this and I did that and I did this and this happened, and then all of a sudden, boom, I ended up in this position where I'm doing this coaching and this teaching, right? So that was my first insight. I came up with this model that thinking is a connection. And at the time, I was studying this course by Paul J. Meyer, which was all about goal setting. And what I realized was thinking of a goal is kind of like memory in reverse, If I remember having the dream when I was 10 and I'm 32 now, then that's a connection to 10-year-old. And if I imagine having a taking a trip. What I'm doing is I'm connecting to the future. So all of a sudden it was like, aha, big light bulb went off in my head. It was like, that's what thinking is. Thinking is connecting, right? And so everything unfolded from that. And so one of the first insights that I had was, well, if I have a goal and it takes me a year to achieve it, let's say, then a year from now, I'm going to be able to remember setting that goal. The same as I can remember having the dream at 10. So therefore, there must be a connection between me a year from now and me today, setting the goal, right? So from that end, I would say I remember setting this goal a year ago. But from this end, what do I call that? Well, what I call it now is contacting my future self. But at that time, I didn't have that language to use. So I just said, well, I just imagine myself in the goal and I visualize being there. And I, sort of use my intuition. Okay, here I am. I'm at the goal now. I've achieved the goal. How did I get here? And that's literally what I asked myself when I was planning to go to England, right? How could, here I am speaking in England. How did I get here? How did I arrange this? How did I get this audience?
Right.
And so then, of course, the answer came, well, look for people that already have an audience, i.e. positive thinking groups in the UK, and see if they are interested in having you go there and do a talk. So that's what I did, and it worked, right? So this model, here, I'll share my screen here for a second. So this model, we've talked a lot about this. So here's a negative thought from the past, right? This you might call a negative memory. Okay, here's Naomi back. Here we go. So here's a positive thought, right?
Yep.
And then same process. It's like a phone call from a different person, One's negative and one's positive. And then so the same thing is true in the future, right? If I'm thinking of a positive goal that I want to achieve, this is how I see it now, right? Here's the map of inner space-time. Here's me in the now, and I'm connecting with this positive future. And here's the same thing. This is a negative thought, right? So this is the model that I developed after.
I love that model.
I think it's fantastic.
I think of it the same way myself.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I mean, because you see, when I was trying to figure out this dream when I was 10, first of all, it didn't make any sense. How do I get to be an entrepreneur and a speaker and a writer and a university professor? It's totally bizarre. And then when it happened more or less by a series of accidents. So the idea that your timeline has a kind of a width to it. In other words, we can remember what happened, but we can also remember what didn't happen. Like last week when I was talking to Michael, I said I was in a car accident when I was a kid. Well, when I was a kid, I was a teenager. A friend of mine was driving. The car flipped over, rolled into the ditch, and he hurt his leg pretty badly. I wasn't hurt at all. So that's what happened. So I can remember that. But I can also remember what I would call a virtual past. For example, I could remember both of us being hurt, if I want to. Or I can remember him not being hurt and us both being unscathed. So I wouldn't necessarily call those a memory. I would say, well, it's thinking of a past that didn't happen. But in my model, it's exactly the same thing. Right? It's connecting to a virtual past event. A virtual past event being what didn't happen, But it might have happened. Like if you'd have looked an hour before we had that accident and you said, okay, an hour from now it's possible we'll be in an accident and it's possible we won't be, right? I mean, each is sort of equally possible in a sense. It's kind of like flipping the coin, you know, it could be a head, it could be a tail, you know.
Right.
And if you were to draw a graph, you know, head and then head or tail, and then if it's a head, you can flip it again, head or tail, and then if it becomes a head again, flip it, could be a head or a tail. So, you know, you could have a combination of flips. So it could be, you know, you could have a path, like your timeline, for example, through time, could be a head, and then a head, and then a tail, and then a tail, and then a head, and then a tail, and then a tail, and then a head. And somebody else can have a head, and a head, and a head, and then a tail, and then a head, and then a head, and then a tail, and they're in a different place, right?
Right.
Because at any point in time, you know, the future can unfold yes or no kind of a deal. So that model that I call now the, you know, the model of inner space-time, so all of those possibilities are virtual futures, let's say, right? When we start the process. And then when you look backwards, if you end up eventually getting to your goal, you look back, and like Steve Jobs says, you can't tell what's going to happen looking into the future. You can only tell by looking into the past. You can see where the dots line up. You can say, how did you get here? Oh, well, I had this head, and then this tail, and then this head, and this head, and this tail, and that's why I'm here, you know, like
Right.
Michael Caine. Oh, I talked to that guy in the butter factory. He told me about the newspaper. Or like me, you know, I sent an email to 25 positive thinking groups in England, and one of them told me, write to Sue Stone. She's the biggest person around here. So I wrote to Sue Stone, and we had a conversation, and she said, yeah, love to have you come and talk to my group in Bournemouth, right? So that's how that happened. So like it makes sense looking backwards, you can see all those little dots. But looking into the future, you can't tell which one's going to work out. Right? So you sort of have to try them all, you know? So, so the process then is, I started mentioning this a minute ago, Naomi, when you were on the phone there.
Yep, apologize.
No, that's fine. So this process, as I see it, you know, the workbook and everything, a lot of the worksheets, the purpose of those is to get clear on what your goal is. And of course, when you flip and you get a head, then you have another goal. Oh, flip another head, right? Well, if you flip it and it's a tail, you have to go, oop, now what? Now I'm here. I wanted to be there, but I'm here. Now what do I do? Well, I got to flip it again, you know, and then try and get two heads in a row to make up for it, kind of a thing. So you never quite know. So part of the process of that workbook is to figure out what your goal is and get clear on it, right? And some of the worksheets are about building your motivation and that sort of thing. You know, what's it worth to me, right? But then the other part of the process, and you can do this directly without even using the workbook, if you know what your goal is, right? You can just go there in your mind. And so when I first had this insight, I realized, you know, if I set a goal and I achieve it a year from now or 2 years from now, then because I had figured out that thinking is a connection. So a memory is a connection to a past, and a goal is a connection to a possible future, right? So when I arrive at that goal a year from now or 2 years from now, I'm going to be able to remember me setting the goal. So therefore, there's a connection between that person, that successful possible self, and me right now. And theoretically, I should be able to pick up by intuition. I should be able to get some intuition from this future self, possible future self, right? That was my original thought. So so that involves meditating, thinking, you know, using your inner senses, trying to pick up little nudges, little intuitions about what to do, and making different choices and trying different things, right? So, so what I've said in the past is I believe every thought follows the same process. Every thought is a connection to the past or the future or some parallel reality that is not happening, right? So what happened yesterday or a couple days ago, I was at the beach, and doing my little meditation there. And so I was in my car, and I started to back up my car, and I had a thought, and the thought was, better check behind you. You remember a couple months ago you backed up and you hit a truck that had pulled in behind you and you didn't see it, right? So I sort of took a double check, made sure nothing was behind me, and then I backed up, right? And then I thought, okay, well, what just happened there? Well, on the one hand, you could say, oh, I had an idea. I had the thought, better check behind you, double check. That's one way to describe it. Or I could say, oh, I got a message from my past self. The self that hit the car behind me, right?
Right.
And he said to me, double check, don't back up without making sure there's nothing behind you, right? Because what happened, I had pulled into this parking spot, I was tired and I had a little bit of a nap, and then I just opened my eyes and I backed up and I hadn't noticed that somebody pulled in behind me, right, while I was asleep or while I was nodding off there. And so I could describe it that way, right? I could say, well, I got a message from my past self and it said, double check your rear, before you back up, take a look, right? So now that hadn't occurred to me before. I mean, it's the same thing, exactly, it's the same process, right? But I had never thought of that little hunch in your mind. I had never thought of that in that context, that, oh, that's a message from a past self too, right? What happens oftentimes now when I close the door, like I just did to let the cat in, right? Because a year ago or so I jammed my thumb in the door and I had a black fingernail for a couple of months. You remember?
I remember. I watched it grow out.
So as often as not, when I go to close that door now, I get a little voice in my head that says, hey, make sure your fingers are clear, And so in a sense, that's like, oh, that's a message from my past self too. I got that connection going that when I bang my finger and I get a little voice in my head saying, hey, don't do that again, right? So, because what we were talking about last week was this idea that, you're always kind of talking to yourself. And I posed the question at the end of last week's video. When you talk to yourself, who are you talking to? And when you hear a little message in your head, like, don't jam your finger in the door, where's that coming from? So I would say now, using this model that I just described there, I would say, oh, it's from my past self, right?
Right.
So normally I would say it's my inner self, but my inner self masquerades as my past self or my future self. So in other words, every one of those little squares, like I said, if you imagine a diagram, head, tail, and then from the head you got head and tail again. So you got all these little Y's, right? All these little possibilities. Every one of those is like a possible future self, right? So if I remember getting my degree, walking across the stage, getting my degree from the university president, I could say, I remember that. Or I could say, oh, I can get into my past self and I can see that, I can experience that again, right? Same process, just different words, just different description. The same as if I show you a picture of an Alsatian, you can say, oh, that's a German Shepherd, or somebody else might say, oh, that's a police dog. Somebody else may say, ooh, that's a big dog, Same dog, just different description, right? So, so what do you think about that? The fact that your dialogue, your inner dialogue that you have, is a connection to your inner self, which could be in the past or in the future, in the positive, in the negative. What do you think about that? We would love to have you join us in this online community for $1 a day. You get your own PDF copy of the book upon which this entire training series is based, along with 2 powerful meditation visualization recordings. You also get a free copy of this Design Your Life workbook and a 4-hour video course that tells you how to use it to change your life step by step. You get lifetime access to all of this on day 1, and you can cancel your registration at any time. Just go to mindtimeandpower.com and click the link to join the online community.